The small regional airport was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that made every engine sound louder than it should. Ethan Cole stood near the maintenance hangar wiping grease from his hands onto a worn cloth. He wasn't a pilot, he wasn't even ground crew officially, he just did odd mechanical jobs to keep planes running and bills paid. Being a single dad didn't leave room for career dreams. His 8-year-old daughter, Lily, was at home with her elderly neighbor, probably finishing her homework. Ethan checked his phone briefly, one missed message from her that simply read, "Don't be late, Daddy." He smiled faintly before slipping it back into his pocket. Above the runway, a private jet began its descent. The aircraft didn't belong here often. It was sleek, expensive, the kind that carried people whose names appeared in financial headlines. Ethan noticed something strange immediately. The landing angle was wrong. Too steep, too unstable. He squinted toward the cockpit windows as the jet dipped suddenly, correcting too sharply. "That's not right," he muttered. The radio crackled faintly from the nearby control booth. Static, broken communication. Ethan felt a cold rush through his chest. He had worked around planes long enough to recognize when something wasn't routine. The jet's left wing dipped lower than it should have. The wheels barely touched the runway before bouncing violently back into the air. Inside the cockpit, Billionaire CEO Victor Langston gripped his seatbelt as alarms blared. He had flown through turbulence before, negotiated billion-dollar risks. But this wasn't controlled risks. This was failure. "Hydraulic pressure's unstable," the co-pilot shouted. The runway rushed toward them again. Outside, Ethan dropped the rag and ran. He didn't think about who was inside. He didn't think about contracts or insurance or consequences. He just saw metal moving wrong and reacted. The jet slammed down harder the second time. Sparks exploded beneath the left side. Smoke began trailing from the rear. The aircraft skidded sideways, veering dangerously close to the fuel storage area. Inside the cabin, Victor felt the world tilt violently. Oxygen masks dropped. Luggage compartments burst open. Someone screamed, "Brace!" the pilot yelled. Ethan reached the emergency vehicle parked near the hangar, jumping into the driver's seat without hesitation. He wasn't assigned to this. It wasn't his responsibility. But responsibility doesn't ask for permission. The jet finally ground to a halt near the edge of the runway, one engine still whining dangerously. Ethan drove straight toward it. By the time he reached the smoking aircraft, airport staff were just beginning to react. Ethan grabbed the portable fire extinguisher and sprinted toward the rear access door. The cabin door jammed halfway open. Inside, smoke thickened quickly. Victor coughed violently as panic rippled through the cabin. The co-pilot struggled with the emergency release. Then Ethan appeared at the doorway. "Move!" he shouted firmly, climbing into the cabin through the partially opened hatch. He began directing passengers toward the exit one by one, ignoring the heat biting at his arms. Victor hesitated only once before following instructions. Outside, the fire suppression crew finally reached the runway, but by then, Ethan had already helped half the cabin out. The last to exit was Victor himself. As Ethan helped him down the portable steps, their eyes locked briefly. Victor's expression wasn't pride, it wasn't fear, it was recognition. The kind that forms in a single moment when one life stands between you and something final. Sirens echoed across the runway as emergency teams surrounded the jet. Ethan stepped back quietly, breathing hard, watching professionals take over. He didn't wait for thanks. He checked his watch. He was already late. And he had no idea that by sunrise, 3 black Cadillacs would be parked outside his mother's house. The television played softly in the background. She stirred only long enough to whisper, "You came." "I always do," he replied quietly. He didn't mention the jet. He didn't mention the billionaire whose life had nearly ended less than 2 hours earlier. To Ethan, it had been simple. Someone was in danger. He helped, then he went home. The next morning began like every other. Cereal bowls, school backpack, a quick search for Lily's missing shoe under the couch, ordinary chaos, ordinary love. The kind of life that didn't involve headlines or corporate empires. Then came the sound. Low-end gents, smooth, expansive. Ethan frowned as 3 black Cadillacs rolled slowly onto his narrow street. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Children stopped riding bikes. The vehicles parked precisely in front of his small house. Lily froze mid-step. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" Ethan forced a calm smile. "I doubt it." The rear door of the center Cadillac opened. Victor Langston stepped out, dressed in a tailored gray suit despite the faint bandage visible near his temple. 2 security men stood behind him, scanning the quiet neighborhood carefully. Ethan recognized him instantly. Lily looked confused. "Who's that?" "Someone I met yesterday," Ethan replied carefully. Victor walked toward the house with deliberate steps. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't arrogant. He carried himself like a man used to control, but today, something else was present. Gratitude. "You left before I could thank you," Victor said once he stood on the small front lawn. Ethan shrugged lightly. Didn't seem necessary. Victor studied the peeling paint on the porch railing, the old pickup in the driveway, the motor's life laid out plainly before him. "You saved 43 lives," he said quietly, "including mine." Lily looked up at her father, stunned. "You saved a plane?" Ethan crouched slightly beside her. It wasn't just me. There was an uncomfortable silence between them. Ethan didn't look impressed. He didn't look proud. He looked slightly impatient. I'd have to get her to school, he said simply. Victor's eyebrow lifted slightly, not in offense but surprise. You're not curious why I'm here? The billionaire asked. Ethan met his gaze steadily. To say thank you, and more. Victor gestured toward the Cadillacs. One of his assistants stepped forward, holding a thin leather folder. I don't accept money for doing the right thing, Ethan interrupted calmly before the folder even opened. Victor paused. You assume too much, he replied evenly. The assistant hesitated. I didn't come to buy your heroism, Victor continued. I came because men who act without hesitation are rare, and I need rare. Ethan frowned slightly. I fix engines, raise my daughter. That's my life. Victor glanced at Lily, who watched everything with wide, curious eyes. You understand machinery, you understand pressure. And yesterday, you didn't freeze. Ethan felt the weight behind those words. This isn't about gratitude, Victor said softly. It's about opportunity. Lily tugged at Ethan's sleeve. Daddy, what's happening? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He swore the first time since the runway fire. He felt something more dangerous than smoke. Change. And Victor Langston had not brought 3 Cadillacs for a simple thank you. Victor didn't step closer. He didn't push. He simply stood on Ethan's lawn like a man used to being heard without raising his voice. I own Langston Aerotech, he said calmly. We build aircraft systems for half the private aviation industry. Yesterday wasn't just an accident. It was a failure. Ethan crossed his arms slightly. Mechanical failure happens. Victor shook his head. Not like that. Not a jet that passed inspection 12 hours earlier. His tone shifted, not emotional, but precise. Someone either overlooked something, or someone cut corners. Lily looked between them. Daddy fixes things when they break, she said confidently. Victor glanced at her, then back at Ethan. That's exactly why I'm here. Ethan exhaled slowly. You have engineers? Entire teams? I have engineers who rely on reports, Victor replied. Yesterday, you relied on instinct. There it was again. That word, instinct. Victor gestured subtly, and the assistant opened the leather folder not to reveal a check, but schematics, technical diagrams, maintenance logs, hydraulic flow charts. I want you to look at something, Victor said. Ethan hesitated only a moment before stepping forward. He didn't touch the folder immediately. He scanned the diagrams from a distance, eyes narrowing slightly. Victor noticed you. You see it, don't you? He asked quietly. Ethan stepped closer now. His finger hovered above a section of the hydraulic routing system. Its pressure regulators positioned wrong, he said slowly. If the flow spikes during descent, it'll lag before stabilizing. The assistant stiffened slightly. Victor's eyes sharpened. That was the component that malfunctioned. Ethan straightened, and someone designed it pretty not practical. Silence. Victor didn't look offended. He looked impressed. You said you fixed engines? Victor said carefully. You've just diagnosed the system my senior engineer signed off on. Ethan shrugged faintly. I look at what fails under stress. Victor nodded once. Exactly. Lily tugged Ethan's hand gently. Are you going to work on planes now? She asked. Ethan looked down at her. His world had been small on purpose. Manageable. Safe. He didn't dream beyond survival anymore. I don't know, he admitted honestly. Victor stepped back slightly, giving space instead of pressure. I'm offering you a consulting position, he said calmly. Temporary. You evaluate my aircraft systems independently. No titles, no board politics, just results. Ethan looked at the motor's house behind him. The chipped porch steps. The pickup that sometimes refused to start. Lily's small backpack leaning against the door. What's the catch? He asked. No catch, Victor replied. But there is risk. Ethan's gaze sharpened. Risk how? Victor's voice lowered slightly. If someone inside my company compromised safety, exposing it won't make you popular. There it was. Not a reward. A responsibility. Lily squeezed his hand again. He ran into the fire. She whispered softly. You don't get scared? Ethan almost smiled. He was scared, just not of flames. Victor closed the folder. I don't need you to answer now, he said, but I won't ask twice. The 3 Cadillacs waited silently behind him. Ethan looked at the schematics again. He hadn't been asked to be a hero. He'd been asked to look closer. And sometimes, looking closer reveals more than smoke. It reveals truth. Ethan didn't sleep much that night. After Lily finally drifted off, he sat alone at the small kitchen table with the copied schematics Victor had left behind. The overhead light flickered slightly as he traced lines with his finger, studying the hydraulic system again and again. Something about it felt deliberate, not careless. By morning, his decision was made. When the black Cadillacs returned at 8 a.m., Ethan was already waiting outside. Lily hugged him tightly before school. Don't let the bad guys win, she whispered seriously. He kissed her forehead. I won't. Langston Aerotech's headquarters stood like a glass monument to power. Ethan felt out of place, stepping inside wearing his simple work boots and jacket, but he didn't let it show. Victor met him privately. No board members, no cameras, no announcements. You're sure? Victor asked. I don't do politics, Ethan replied calmly. I just look at what breaks. Victor nodded once. That's exactly what I need. For the next week, Ethan reviewed everything: maintenance reports, supplier invoices, system revisions. He walked factory floors quietly, watching how parts were assembled. He asked simple questions that made senior engineers uncomfortable. Why was this valve changed? Why was this supplier cheaper? Why did inspection times suddenly decrease? Patterns began forming. Cost reductions. Shortened quality checks. One particular subcontractor appearing repeatedly in flagged reports. Ethan cross-referenced everything carefully, building evidence instead of suspicion. On the 8th day, he walked into Victor's office with a thin stack of documents. It's internal, Ethan said quietly. Procurement division signed off on downgraded regulators. They look identical but fail under high-pressure descent. Someone saved money by risking lives. Victor's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. Now Ethan slid the paper forward. Martin Holley, Senior Operations Director. The betrayal wasn't technical. It was human. Victor leaned back slowly. He's been with me 15 years. Ethan met his gaze steadily. Then he knew exactly what he was doing. An emergency board meeting was called that afternoon. Ethan wasn't asked to speak publicly, but Victor insisted he remain present. Evidence was projected. Financial discrepancies revealed. Maintenance shortcuts exposed. Martin denied everything at first. Until the supplier contracts were displayed. Until the internal emails surfaced. Until silence swallowed the room. Security escorted Martin out of the building before sunset. Victor stood at the conference room window afterward, looking down at the city. 43 lives, he said quietly. Over margins. Ethan shrugged lightly. Pressure reveals what people are made of. Victor turned to him slowly. You could stay, he said. Permanent position. Lead safety oversight. Ethan thought of Lily, of bedtime stories, of simple mornings without boardrooms. Or consult when you need honesty, Ethan replied. But I'm not built for towers of glass. Victor smiled faintly for the first time. No, you're built for foundations. 2 months later, Langston Aerotech announced a new safety initiative named the Coal Standard and Independent Review process, designed to prevent internal corruption. Ethan's name wasn't attached publicly. He preferred it that way. Life returned to normal, mostly at one evening. Ethan and Lily stood near the airport fence, watching planes take off against the sunset. Lily squeezed his hand. Did you save them again? She asked. Ethan looked at the rising aircraft, steady and stable against the sky. Sometimes, he said softly, saving people doesn't mean running into fire. Sometimes it means refusing to look away, and somewhere high above them, another jet landed safely because one single dad chose to look closer when something felt wrong.